Hey everyone, and welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys, and this is your channel for photography, for wildlife, and for wildlife photography. And today's video, a focus on the Nikon 800 6.3 lens and a comparison to all of the Nikon wildlife lenses. I told you before, I think this is one of the best values, if not the best value in wildlife lenses, but with the changes that have occurred in the last year, is it still? I'll let you know right after this. Now, we've seen some changes over the last year with Nikon's wildlife lineup, specifically with price. We're going to introduce this video and talk a little bit about price, but we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the 800 6.3. And why did I choose to get my hands on this one again? Well, I had a couple reasons. Number one, about a year ago, I made a video that detailed some of the features and the quality of this lens. So if you're interested in a real detailed evaluation, check out the video over here. Today's video was a little bit different though. And what I wanted to do is look at some of the changes that have occurred over the last year, specifically with price. So I'm going to list all of these Nikon lenses in just a minute over here and show you what the current price is and how that price has changed up or down over the last year. Relative to that pricing change is this 800 6.3, because about a year ago I told you I think this is maybe the best value in wildlife lens. And I'm going to talk about why I think that may still be true. But it has gone through some price changes. So to start, I'm going to pull up a couple charts here, but let's just start with the listing of current lenses. Now, I consider these to be the current wildlife lenses for Nikon, not excluding macro and some of the smaller lenses like the 70 to 200. But if we start with just the prices over here, you're going to see from top to bottom, we've got the 180 to 600 6.3, by the way, not the best quality out of this lens lineup. However, this one could give a strong run for the best value at just around $2,000. That price has been relatively the same since it came on the market, relatively. The 100 to 400 5.6, a nice wildlife lens with that zoom feature that allows for maybe larger game. So if you shoot mammals, this could be a really, really strong lens, pretty light lens, and that one comes in around $2,500. The next three lenses are prime lenses that have taken a price increase, mostly around $500 in that range. And I'll tell you what the price increase on this one has been over the last year. But I've got the 400 4.5. We're going to talk a little bit about that one in this video, touch on it. I've got the 600 6.3. That's a PF lens. By the way, PF makes these lenses lighter. That's phase Fresnel, not phase Fresnel as it is spelled, but phase Fresnel lens. It's a different optics system that uses a little bit less glass, still maintains a lot of quality, and because it doesn't have as many components inside it, it gives it a very light weight. So you can see that that 600 millimeter lens weighs just a little bit more than a 400 millimeter lens. So that's the real feature with the 600 6.3 for Nikon, is that light weight. Also good optical quality. We'll talk a little bit about that one in a minute. But let's focus and stop for a minute with the 800 6.3. Used to be around $6,000, is now around $7,000. That's a pretty significant price increase. You're talking about a price increase of around 15%, and that's the biggest price increase we've seen over these lenses. Now, with that said, I couldn't believe the price they were selling it at when it came out. And I made this point that years ago we had a few offerings from Nikon that were 800 5.6, so just a third of a stop difference, and significantly heavier. This one coming in around 5 pounds. The old lenses in this size, this 800 millimeter size, I think these were 14 pounds. I mean, these were big, monstrous lenses. So we got a lighter lens with a third of a stop difference in its aperture. So not 5.6, but 6.3, very minimal difference in aperture. And it is $10,000. It is a third of the price of what Nikon used to sell this lens in this size with this aperture for 15, 20 years ago. It's a pretty significant change in pricing. And when they announced this lens, I thought for sure this was $10,000 to $12,000. So even taking a price increase, I still think there's a lot of value in this. And it's tough to say $7,000 is a good value, but we know this is an expensive hobby, or we know this is an expensive pastime. So it is at $7,000, half the price or less of the two elite lenses made by Nikon. The 800 6.3 is an S series lens. That means it's built to higher specifications, things like weather sealing and resistance. It's just optically, it means it performs at its highest level. Now there's two other lenses in here. I consider these the elite wildlife lenses. That's the 400 2.8. That's the lens I use. That's around 13.5. That one, has taken a price drop over the last year. And the 600 f4 is at 14.5, and that has also taken a price drop. So the Elite lenses came down a little bit, not 15%, but they came down about 5%-ish. But this one took a price increase. And does that make a difference? Like, did the price, did the delta in those prices change enough to say, maybe we just spend more money and get one of the Elite lenses? And I'm not sure about that one. Now, in terms of its difference, because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this lens with a lot of images coming up, so bear with me, you're going to enjoy this one. I did a trip to Alaska. It was a private workshop. I had a client with me. I asked the client to shoot this lens and compare it to what she had been shooting, which was a 400 4.5, and then give me her thoughts on it. So I got some comparison videos or some comparison images in this one, and thoughts from a user, not my own. So I'll tell you what her thoughts were. I'll also tell you some observations I had about this lens being used and what I saw. So 800 6.3 is essentially the same. It's not exactly the same as a 600 f4 lens with a teleconverter on it. And what are the differences? Well, obviously the 600 has some flexibility. You can take the teleconverter on or off. And Nikon 600 millimeter lens and 400 millimeter lens have built-in teleconverters. Now that alone to me is a feature that's probably worth $2,000, maybe more. It is just a great feature to have in a lens. Gives you a lot of versatility without taking the lens on and off all the time. This one doesn't give you that level of versatility, but if you're somebody who finds that you've always got that teleconverter engaged, and I know people who have a 600 f4 and the teleconverter is engaged almost all the time, this would be a serious consideration. The build quality, just to touch on it, while it's an S-series lens, it lacks a couple of the function features, the programmable features of the 400 2.8 and the 600 f4. Those have I believe they're calling it a function ring up here that lets you recall focus and do some things. You can program it. So it's got a couple extra buttons and gadgets on there. But other than that, quality-wise, not a huge difference. This is a very, very well-built lens. Again, a little bit different in terms of optic performance. That PF lens does change the optics. And hang on for this because I haven't really talked about the difference in that PF lens and what it does optically, but I do have a pretty good example to show you at the end of the video. Two images captured side by side with two different lenses at the same focal length and some of the small differences in that. You will be surprised, by the way, when I tell you that this thing, as is, was probably sharper than my 400 2.8 when I added a 2x teleconverter. Again, a 400 2.8 2x teleconverter, that got me to about 800 millimeters at 5.6 versus 800 millimeters at 6.3. Very small differences in terms of light gathering ability. And surprisingly, this one was pretty good at sharpness. Now, let's just kind of round out a couple things. I'm going to add weight onto my little chart that I put over here earlier. And I'm going to add a section for what I consider to be the optics. This is how historically I would have graded these out subjectively. Now, I've never done a video where I could compare them all, but I've got my hands on several at the same time. And I got to compare these one against the other. And this is about where I stand. Now, you can argue with me down in the comments on this one, but you're not allowed to comment unless you're subscribed. So I'm going to remind you to subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the bell for notifications. It lets you know when I have a new video out. And hit that like button because you're going to like this video if you're not already. Hit the like button. That'll push the content out to people that might be interested in this. My gradings, my subjective gradings over here. I've graded the 100 to 800 at a B+. It is a very solid lens. I don't think many people could tell you the difference between this lens and a prime lens made by Nikon without really getting in detailed and pixel peeping. So for the average photographer, you're not going to notice significant differences. And this one comes in the cheapest at $2,000. So pretty good optically, a lot of ability to zoom with this one, really good focal range. Maybe it's a B, but I'm giving this one a B+ because I think at that price point, maybe I weigh that in a little bit extra. The 100 to 400, I've got that one listed as an A-, almost indistinguishable from the 400 4.5, which I have rated at an A. I really, really like the sharpness on that lens. The 600 6.3, that's that PF lens. I've used that one in the past. At $5,000, this is not my favorite lens. The weight is what the consideration is for this. Optically, it's very good. There's nothing wrong with this lens. But when I can get an 800 6.3 for just about $2,000 more, to me personally, that's where the value comes in. I get a much longer reach with the same aperture. Relatively speaking, I think that's just a better deal. So I got the 600 6.3 at an A minus. I've got this one also at an A minus, and then I have the two big boys, the 600 f4 and the 400 2.8, both at A's. I did a comparison video, so if you're interested in those two lenses, I forget what I call it. I'll put a thumbnail up here for it. My finding was that the 600 f4 lens was sharper at 15 feet and beyond when you had to crop the 400 to get the same ratio of subject in frame. It was also sharper than the 400 2.8 when you added a teleconverter to essentially equalize the focal length. The 400 2.8, however, is sharper when you could get close enough to get the same subject in frame. So I did a video on that. You'll have to watch that video to get that comparison. The 400 2.8 honestly is the sharper lens, but most wildlife photographers are shooting a little bit more at a distance, so the 600 f4 gets some advantages there. Okay, so that's my run through. That's my grading. I put a couple notes over here for each one. That's where we're at in today's pricing. Now, let's focus on this one because this is the one we use. So here's the backstory on the lens and how it was tested. I had it for 30 days. I've used this lens before pretty extensively. My overall feeling about this is if you don't need to be close to a subject, and with an 800 millimeter lens, you don't need to be 6 feet away. The minimum focus distance on this is 16 feet. Relative to some of the other lenses we're talking about here, the 400 millimeter lens has an 8-foot minimum focus, so quite a difference there. The 600, I believe, is at 14 feet, so not as big a difference in minimum focus distance. For some people, minimum focus is completely irrelevant. I did a whole video on minimum focus. I had a lot of people tell me that I'm crazy. Why am I even talking about 8 feet for wildlife? Trust me, it depends on your style. I shoot songbirds inside of 14 feet fairly often. My sweet spot is around 12 to 15 feet, so I don't necessarily like a lens that's got a 16-foot minimum focus. However, for most people, that's not the case, and 16 feet is not going to be prohibitive when it comes to shooting. A couple times, we were out in the field, and I forgot that she was, Barb, who's my client. I don't know if I mentioned her. I'll show her work in here, but I forgot that she was using this 800 millimeter lens. She usually uses a 400 millimeter 4.5 on our workshops, and there were times where I was like, what are you doing? And she would be backing away, and she's like, I'm too close, I can't focus. And I was like, I'm around 12 feet away, and she had to get behind me, or we had to move back together. So one of the drawbacks to that lens is that minimum focus if it's a concern. That is going to be pretty standard, by the way, for any 800 millimeter lens. The older Nikons had the same type of minimum focus restriction. So a lot of people want to know now, like, okay, Scott, so you got this lens, you had a client that used it. She normally used a 400 4.5. She upgraded to this 800 6.3, what happened? And was she satisfied with it compared to it? The first couple days were out there, and I've got some images to show you over here in just a second. First couple days were out there. She's using this to test it. Some struggles, mostly around acquisition. So when we were shooting songbirds particularly, those songbirds that move very quickly, you've got 800 millimeters, you get a very tight field of view, you can't see as much in the frame, so it was a little bit tougher. Not as tough with portraits on things like waterfowl. So waterfowl a little bit easier. We did some like hawks and raptors, fairly easy. The songbirds was really the tough one around this. A lot of people, when they think of these longer focal lengths, think of tight portraits. Well, that's a lot of lens. Everything's going to be a tight portrait. It's not the case. So what I want to do is, as we were using this lens, I want to show you some real life examples over here. So on the side of the screen, let me just pop this up for myself so I can see what I'm looking at. I'm going to show you that not everything has to be tight. I'm going to start with some looser compositions. So I want you to notice this is some caribou that were out there in beautiful sunset in northern Alaska. It never sets, so you often can get some really nice colors. So here you can see some soft pinks in the sky, really pretty. With a 400 millimeter lens, the caribou would be incredibly small, and we would have had to crop probably just to make it seen. So I thought the dimensions on this one were really good. Not a lot of crop on this particular image. A few other smaller in scene animals. This one, here we go. This is a Smith's Longspur. I'd like to take credit as guiding this workshop that I called this bird out. I didn't get this image. I don't know when she got it or how she got it, but I was focused on something else. This guy popped up behind us. It was a cold morning, and you could see hopefully it comes through on YouTube. There's some breath coming out of that Smith's Longspur. A really, really nice bird to work with. So you could see, based off of this, there are some smaller in frame opportunities. Not everything has to be tight. Now, when we get to what I would consider like average, so where the subject isn't small in frame, it's not real tight, this is where this lens starts to shine, because you don't have to crop much with most working distances to get this. So I'm going to pull up a few of these. Now, there's some mammals in here too. You know me as a bird photographer, but I'm going to show you some mammals. These are ground squirrels. Just a few of them in here that I really, really like. This one was my favorite, coming out of its little burrow there, perched up, looking around. Really, really, really pretty stuff. Some more, again, I'm going to just call these like average with a good working distance. You don't have to be super tight. This is a Townsend's warbler. Working distance on this, probably about 18 feet. Didn't have to be super close. It gives the bird some room, and it allows you to not crop to get these dimensions. And if you don't like that smaller in frame aspect, you got a nice working room and you can still get some really, really nice portraits. I mentioned we did some mammals, by the way. I'll pull up a couple of these. I want to reference this fox. This is I think they call this an northern Alaskan subspecies. So there's one species of red fox. It's prominent throughout North America. I think it's everywhere in North America, by the way. But regionally, there are these subspecies, and they all have some different attributes, often around color. I'm going to show you one in a minute, but I wanted just to look at the pretty coat on this one. Kind of average in frame. This fox was pretty far away, by the way. But having that really nice reach allows you to get a close look or a closer feel, a more intimate feel, without cropping significantly down. So while this one's cropped down to about 3,000 pixels using a Z9 body, with a 400 millimeter lens, we would have had to crop this down to about 1,500 pixels to get the same image. And that's a lot of quality loss. I am going to show you that at the end of the video. So I've got some quality comparisons. You want to stick around because you're going to enjoy that one. Me, kind of average in frame. Here's a golden plover. I wanted to put this in there because there's some bokeh in the background. One of the drawbacks to PF lenses is often that the bokeh doesn't render as nicely. Here it shows the bokeh, and sometimes with longer lenses we worry that bokeh may not be as creamy, but with this lens it's not a problem at all. Remember, it's a longer lens, and even though that aperture is 6.3, because of the ratio, the length to aperture ratio, you get some really nice bokeh. So you can see there's some, we call these like specular highlights back there, these little bokeh balls. Just a couple more in here. Again, I'm considering these kind of like average, not tight, not loose. This is a rock ptarmigan poking its head out of the tundra. Really, really, really pretty image. What a lot of people, though, with longer lenses really aspire to is some tighter portraits. And to that extent, I wanted to show you a series of tighter portraits that I think you're absolutely going to enjoy. Now, I mentioned a fox earlier, and I want to bring this one up. This is just gorgeous. Let's look at this for a second and just talk about how beautiful wildlife is. This is that northern Alaska subspecies of a red fox, but you'll notice it's almost all black. There's names for these pelts or these coats, and there's a phrase called a silver fox. There's a phrase called a cross fox, and these are normally foxes that have coloration. They call this like melanistic, but it's dark colorings. Sometimes they're almost all black. Sometimes they have like some silver highlights on there. In this case, it's a really interesting fox to me because I haven't photographed these at all. This was the first time photographing a fox that had this coloration. It was almost a silver fox, but it had some red ears. And I think, if you put down in the comments if you know anything more about foxes than I do, I think they would call this a silver cross fox. So it's got kind of a combination of the cross fox features, which is more red, kind of a black line down the back, across the shoulders, and a silver fox, which would be almost all black. So just a beautiful, beautiful animal. Really, really like that, but nice and tight. So now we're getting these really, really tight, intimate portraits, focused on the eyes. Really, really, really pretty stuff on that. Couple more, speaking of like tight portraits, we ran across some of these are phalaropes, these are red-necked phalaropes. I like putting things in context. So when I'm guiding workshops, part of my style is to include some things that other people may not like. So I know some people love these super clean images. No, this is not a judgment on that. This is just a style preference. I like these little marsh grasses. On this one, you can see nice and tight. A lot of bokeh because we're really, really getting close, probably around 20 feet on this one. So a good working distance, but for this lens, it still feels nice and tight. Ran across a porcupine. I'll tell you a story about this guy in a minute. Two of them here. Came right at us at the road. There's not many people doing workshops in this area of Alaska, but I happen to know somebody. His name's Matt Studebaker. Feel free, I'll put a link down there to his video. Really, really nice guy. We were in a situation where I saw a van pulled over and I saw some guys with long lenses and I said, I guarantee you that's Matt. So we gave him some space. They were photographing this porcupine. He was kind of just walking around the side of the road. Did not really care about much. As he started walking away from them, we just laid down on the gravel and waited for him to walk right at us. Porcupines, by the way, they don't shoot quills out, so you don't have to be too concerned with them. Don't touch them. The quills are very, very painful. Your dogs may have experienced this. Hopefully you haven't. But one of the things, getting back to the differences regionally in some animals, look at the coat on this porcupine. We don't see this type of coat on a porcupine in Pennsylvania. At least I have never. But this thing was just really, really, really puffy and lush. It looked like it just got its hair all sprayed and fluffed out. Just a really, really pretty image. Another ptarmigan, a little bit closer. So again, we're looking at getting some more detailed looks. Look at the songbirds. I mean, look at how close this is. I'm going to put this up and then I'm going to crop it so you can see the level of detail here because it's not going to come across in this image. But let me crop this down really, really, really tight. And let me show you how much detail is in the face of that bird. It is just really, really impressive. This bird probably was about 20 feet away. So again, nice working distance, but you still get these really nice tight portraits with that 800 millimeters. Got a couple more to show you. Another songbird feeding on the ground in the tundra with some emerging flowers. Really, really pretty stuff. I am going to show you the best find. I was just delighted to find this one. The best find we found are hawk owls, and we found a couple of them up there. This is really, really good. Now, we're not looking at 20 feet away anymore. This hawk owl was probably about 50 feet away, maybe more, but right on the side of the road. I will tell you, anybody that knows me, I'm not an owl freak, but there is a beauty to these creatures. I have never worked with a northern hawk owl before. This owl was not like anything I expected. When we see owls around here, they are alert to our presence. They know you're there. This guy didn't care. I think this is typical of the species. I have heard this, by the way. I did a video that talked about great gray owls one time, and people said, Scott, when you work with them and when you see them, my theory was that a lot of these owls, they certainly must become habituated to people at some time. I still think there is some of that goes on. However, this guy was not habituated. This guy was in the middle of nowhere. And he didn't care, like literally didn't care. Now, we couldn't have gotten closer to him because we're on the road and, you know, he's down a hill a little bit, but really, really, really impressive. And the level of detail, I'll zoom in a little bit. I'm going to crop this down and put it up here. You don't need any more sharpness out of a lens than you're getting out of this 800 6.3. Like, I know some people are just fanatical about pixel peeping and sharpening and this one and that one. I got a chart up in this line. And I get that there is some of that out there, but I do not look at photography as creating the sharpest possible image. Like, my equipment to me isn't just about finding the sharpest instrument. So with that being said, you don't need an image sharper than this for anything. Like, there's no reason. Having this sharper isn't going to do anything. Now, if I was closer, it would appear sharper, right? That's just a matter of distance. But the lens performing as it should is giving you an incredibly sharp image. I'm going to show you a direct comparison at the end of this. So this is a northern hawk owl. And I'm just going to end with my favorite image. I think we had a horned grebe that was near a trail. There were people in this area pretty frequently. This thing didn't care at all. It literally dove, and as you've ever watched diving ducks or grebes or loons, they will often dive and pop up, 50 feet away, 100 feet away. This one did the opposite. He popped up right in front, and I mean right in front of us. So Again, the working distance on this at 16 feet, this is where this duck was. This it's not technically a duck. Don't get on me, my birder friends. This grebe was 15, 16, 17 feet. And this is about as tight as you can get it. Watch this one. Just absolutely gorgeous. Like, look at that. Look at the eye, the pose. You don't need a sharper lens in this. Period. Like, end of story. I don't care if you shot this with that 600, it costs $1,000 more, you shoot that 600 f4, you're not going to get an image that is any sharper or better in terms of quality than the image you're seeing right now on that screen. So, I told you I have some comparisons for you. So I'm gonna kind of, that's my Alaska trip. A really, really great trip. I try not to do too much shameless self-promotion here. I've got my Patreon site. I'll plug that once in a while. I'm going to plug it over here because it's part of what I do. I do some limited workshops. I don't talk about them often. I do mostly private clients. You can always send me an email if you're ever interested in exploring that. I do most of them in the eastern United States, Pennsylvania. I got a lot of locations out here I like to use. I do one up in New Hampshire for songbirds and loons. Going forward, my career paths will change a little bit. I may do more of these workshops. You can always contact me. And if my style resonates with you, feel free to look me up and maybe we can connect. But man, what a trip. It was just an amazing trip. A lot of travel, a lot of birds, and was really, really, really glad that I got to not just to use this, but to actually give it to somebody or let them use it and see what the differences were. So here's what happened. So the first couple of days, I noticed Barb is using this lens quite a bit because she wants to get used to it. Then she starts shooting her 400 again because, she shoots a lot of small end frame work and life is good. And I kind of watched the last 3 days, what's the go-to lens? And it was interesting because even in the environments that were a little bit darker, that had less light, where the 400 would have in theory performed better because it's a 4.5 aperture versus 6.3. This was on the body, I think, the whole time. This was the lens of choice. Now, I'm not saying she never went to the other lens, but this, I would say 80% of the time. And my guess is that if I could take one lens away, I think this is the one that she would go with. What a wonderful set of lenses, by the way. When we talk about price and value, having a combination of the 400 4.5 and the 800 6.3, super value. This lens I have always thought is the best lens for bird and flight work, especially given that price. Now, again, you can pay more for a 600 f4 lens. I almost said 600 6.4, 600 f4 lens. You can pay more for that, and it's a great bird and flight lens, but for $8,000 less, like, it's just a great, again, that's why I keep getting back to value. At $7,000, doesn't feel like value money, but it's value lens for what we do. A couple of pros and cons. I'm gonna list just a couple things up here, some quick thoughts on this one. One, still think it's a great value. Price went up, still a great value. Quality, I still find to be outstanding. I do have the comparison coming up, so stay tuned, don't leave me yet. I find the quality to be outstanding. Almost as good as the Elite lenses, right in that realm. Very hard to tell a difference. Just the reach that it has, really solid. Downfalls, minimum focus distance. I've talked about this several times on this channel. So minimum focus distance, little bit of a downfall. Sometimes the bokeh created in the backlighting. That's what I'm going to show you in just a second. That could be a little bit of a con with this, but there's really missing a function ring, like not a big deal. Build quality on this one's really good. So there's just not a lot. And by the way, it's light. It's an 800 6.3. Now I asked Barb at the end, how did you feel? This is kind of a petite client, so not somebody that's bodybuilder, no offense. How did you feel hand holding this? Many times she could for short periods of time. Now, again, everybody's different. I don't have a problem hand holding this almost like regularly. It's lighter than my 400 2.8. She opted to use a monopod a lot, and that just gave her the opportunity to rest. So in between shooting, it was kind of stationary. I love monopod work, so that might be a consideration. Is it light enough to handhold? For many people, yes. Some people may want an assistant, whether it's a monopod or a tripod. So Not a whole lot. I came back to it a year later. They raised the price $1,000. I still am going to tell you, I think it's maybe the best value in wildlife lenses, even at $7,000. Let's get into one final comparison. For this one, I'm going to switch screens a little bit. So let me just pop over here. I'm going to pull up a couple of images. So I told you I wanted to do like a direct comparison. All right, so this is the hawk owl. All I looked for was similar conditions that we both shot the same hawk owl. Unfortunately, he wasn't looking at us the whole time, but I tried to find the most similar in terms of lighting conditions, ISO, shutter speed, like so everything is kind of balanced out. And these are the images. All right, this is the first one. Now this one was taken at 400 millimeters and cropped to these proportions. So in the frame, I tried to equalize them. So this is 400 millimeters, cropped a lot. This one is 800 millimeter, 6.3, the lens we just talked about, cropped a little bit. So this is around 3,000 pixels tall. And then I shot the same bird with a 2x teleconverter on. I happened to get it looking at me. I just had to use what was available. So yeah, this one's looking, the other two aren't, but that's not going to matter in terms of just image quality. So what I wanted to show you was how do these compare to each other? So the 400 4.5, when I have to crop it, what difference does that make to actual image quality? So let's look at these two and compare them first. So I'm going to flip these two up. I just got to pull this up. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay. And then I'm going to increase the size of my screen here. So what you're seeing on the left is the 400 compared to the 800. And this gives you a difference of the size. So it's 2 times magnification. It's being magnified twice as much by this 800 millimeter lens versus the 400. So if I crop it to fill out the frame, and they're both filling out the frame, so I'm going to zoom in here so we can see it. Let me see if I can get these pretty close. Starting to get pretty close. Look at the difference in quality. Now I know I'm on YouTube, so I know quality doesn't come across on YouTube quite as much, but I promise you, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. There is a significant difference. So let's put these here. The detail in here is struggling a little bit. Again, this is a really, really good lens, really, really sharp lens. But because I have to crop it so much to equal what the 800 does, when I do that, I lose a lot of image quality. So this one's super, super sharp. The 400, without a teleconverter, it just really, really struggles to keep up. All right, now, I want to do another one here for you real quick. So now on the left, this is the 800 millimeter 6.3, and on the right is my 400 millimeter 2.8. Significantly more money. So we're talking almost twice the price. What happens when I add that 2x teleconverter to equalize these two lenses? So essentially these are, I know there's a little bit of a difference, but essentially it's the same lens now. It's about 800 millimeters. One is a 5.6, one is a 6.3. I'm going to say close enough. What happens to quality? Is there a difference? On the left is the eye and bill of the 600 6.3. Let me get in there again. And I just want to, let me get in there again. I'm hitting the wrong button here. Let me just pull these so that they're matched up. All right, there's the eye and the bill of the 600 6.3. Here's the eye and the bill, about the same proportions. I think you can tell that the image on the left at this specific moment is sharper. Now I am really zoomed in. So I'm like 500%. All right, so I'm pixel peeping at this point, but it is sharper. The 2x teleconverter, I lose a little bit of resolution. The one thing I mentioned about PF lenses that can sometimes come into play is background and bokeh. Let me show you on these two images where you start to see that. So if I look at the eye, look at the left, you can see right underneath the eye some really nice feather detail. On the right, not as much. Now again, If I zoom out to a normal viewing distance, it is, I don't want to say negligible. There's a difference, but it's not nearly as noticeable. None of this has been sharpened. So you're seeing this essentially right out of camera, cropped, a little bit of adjustment for light to get them similar. But that's really it. No denoise, no sharpen, nothing going on here. Let's look at the edge. Now this is a little bit of a backlit image. And as I zoom in here, I want you to look at these two areas. So this is where that PF lens can have some impact. You'll notice on the right, you can actually see the feather details. There's no chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration normally occurs when you get a contrast of light and dark. It often comes through as a color. Purple, green, blue are the common colors you see with chromatic aberration. Look at the image on the right, and what you'll actually start to see is a loss of detail back here. Could this be focus? Maybe a little bit, but I'm telling you there's an actual difference in that area, that kind of backlit area where I get a little bit more chromatic aberration, and this could be typical of PF lenses. I don't use PF lenses a lot, but I have looked at a lot of examples of where they start to struggle, and normally it's in backlit conditions, sometimes around bokeh, so light coming through. A video for a different day. But I thought since I have this out here, and I'm extolling the virtues of this wonderful lens, and I'm listing those pros and cons, I should mention that while this lens is sharper than the 400 with the teleconverter, let me pull it up again. It is sharper. It's less money and it's sharper. When we add a teleconverter, it's sharper. However, there are a couple of minor drawbacks. Now, those minor drawbacks tend to be in specific situations. They tend to be fringe details. You're not normally going to see this on the main focus of a subject. So for wildlife subject, normally the eyes, you're not really going to see an impact of that. But you may see it if you shoot a lot of backlit images, if you shoot a lot of things in tough lighting conditions, or if you shoot a lot with bokeh or these specular highlights, things like that. You may see a little bit of that. So wanted to give you that detail. I know people love these side-by-side comparisons. Hopefully that came through and was really, really obvious. Tell me what you like about this video. A little different than the videos I've done. It's not really a product review. It was a little bit of a product refresh. I wanted to get my hands on it, wanted to go over these pricing changes around Nikon, my feelings on whether or not this is still an amazing value. It's still a great value. I don't know about amazing still, but it's still a great value relative to what else is out there. If you're looking at value lenses, 100 to 800, solid optical performance, not as good as the others, but solid optical performance, much less price. So really, really good option at around $2,000. The next step for me in terms of value, I think this is probably the next best value out there. The 800 6.3, just a really, really solid lens with very few drawbacks. I showed you a couple of them, but very few drawbacks. And that's my video for you today. Now, if you're not subscribed to the channel, I mentioned it once, I'm gonna mention it again, because if you're not subscribed, you gotta subscribe to the channel now. Hit the bell for notifications. It'll let you know when I have a new video out. Hit the like button. It's really important because that actually sends this content out to people interested in wildlife photography or camera equipment, or maybe just this lens in particular. So make sure you hit that bell for notifications. That's my video for you today. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.